Hey folks, welcome to Amsoil's Pete and John Talk Fishing. We are in a beautiful setting today up in Sawyer County. We're going to do a little bit of fall muskie fishing. And Pete, don't you love this time of year? You got a little fall in the air. It feels good, doesn't it?
It is the greatest time of year. I say this every year, and I would love for this to last about 8 months. I'd love for time to stop this time of the year. The temperature's perfect. It's my favorite time of the year for muskie fishing in general. It's not real cold. It's not too hot. I like that the fish release well. It's my fave, and it is pretty too.
It is pretty, but one thing I want to spend some time talking about on this month's report is the turnover period, which happens in the upper Midwest, usually in late September, beginning of October. It hasn't happened yet. We're just about to hit October, but generally speaking, I guess a scientific explanation in layman's terms, if you can do it, what happens when a lake turns over?
Yeah, well, the science of it, I'm going to keep pretty simple because I'm not really a scientist. There's probably a whole bunch of multi-syllable words I could get into here if I knew all of them, but essentially warm water gets to be on top in the system, and once the water temperatures warm up through the course of the year, of course that warmer water is always the upper layer, but eventually what happens, and usually on this latitude, it's about 58 degrees to 55 degrees, that lower water temperature. So essentially what happens is when that upper layer gets down below, literally gets colder, then that lower layer is going to come up and everything mixes. That's why they call it turnover. So you've literally got, around here, I always figure 58 degrees, 57 degrees on the surface with a cold front coming in, especially if there's a lot of wind. That's the day everything's going to start to churn. And what happens is, essentially, is you get a period where the water temps, it's murky because things are stirring up because of that turnover stuff. And you basically have the same amount of oxygen content and water temperature from top to bottom. So that's somewhat of what makes it, it's always talked about as a bad time for fishing. Generally it is a little bit tougher because fish definitely relocate. And previous patterns are kind of shot because they can pretty much be anywhere. They can be right on the bottom of the lake. There's now enough oxygen down there. During summer, especially in the deeper lakes, you have the thermocline form, which is that layer where the water temperatures change real fast, and usually the oxygen below that level in the deeper lakes is not enough for most game fish species, so they don't even go below it. Now these lakes turn and basically everything's the same, so they're everywhere.
So deep fish can be shallow and shallow fish can be deep, and right. But the one thing I wanted to ask you, and you brought it up a little bit with the murkiness, there are some physical signs that you can see when a lake's turning over. Sometimes you see muck on the surface and that type of thing, right?
You generally almost always, to varying degrees, see cloudiness, and sometimes like chunks of muck and stuff even floating around, depending on the system you're on. But usually it's cloudy, and it also, if you're looking, which everybody generally has pretty good electronics these days, everything's scattered. I mean, you literally don't see distinct patterns and distinct balls of bait and stuff like that. Everything's moving around. But visually, just relying on the old-fashioned eyeballs, you generally see the murkiness.
Now, when turnover's done, and that can last about a week, right? I mean, for different lakes.
Week to 2.
Week to 2 weeks of turnover. After turnover, it's kind of fun, right? I mean, as far as muskies are concerned, because they can be anywhere.
They literally can be anywhere. Now, one game, and we're in Sawyer County right now, and there's a whole bunch of different bodies of water around here, including rivers. And the one game that you can play during turnover, which can be pretty effective, is generally the fishing is real good in the pre-turnover period. So what you can kind of do, we've got a situation this year, John, where we're way later than normal. Literally, while we're talking here, normally turnover's going on. The way the water temperatures and the weather forecast is set up, we're probably not going to have turnover for a couple weeks yet. So what you can do is you can target the smaller, shallower lakes that are going to cool a lot quicker, and you can kind of target them first as you're getting close to that 58-degree water and maybe looking at the forecast, seeing there's a cold front coming. You want to target those smaller lakes essentially at first, let them get into turnover, and then you start going to the deeper lakes. And what you can do is kind of play a game. Sometimes there'll be a difference between a body of water that's got 80, 90, or 100 feet around here. That turnover will occur sometimes 10 days after some of these smaller bodies of water. So what you're literally trying to do is you're hip-hopping lakes, gradually going to bigger ones, catching that pre-turnover period. And then if it's still tough, you know, when it gets tough on some of those deeper lakes and they actually turn, in a lot of cases you can go back to the rivers or the shallow lakes, and you literally have turnover more or less complete.
Well, you mentioned it there. Another way to avoid turnover is if you're muskie fishing, try rivers. I mean, rivers don't stratify, and they should be good in that period, right?
Yeah, and realistically too, you can travel south and north depending on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to target the pre-turnover period, you could always travel south and find a little bit warmer water. If you say, I want turnover over and I want fall, you could go north.
Yeah, that's a great point. So post-turnover, when turnover is done and you say the fish can be anywhere, I mean, how do you decide to fish deep, shallow? I mean, you know.
Well, the bottom line is there's no rules at all, but generally once turnover is complete, you're going to have overall a little bit deeper movement. The wild card with all of that we play is that, you know, sometimes if you get a little warm-up period, and generally in the afternoon, that, you know, muskies have fins and tails and they swim. That's one thing we all tend to forget to a certain extent. It really doesn't take them long to get from deep to shallow or shallow to deep, so they can move around. And a lot of times they will move shallow. So I guess in general, post-turnover, I'm thinking deeper generally. Deeper breaks, access to deep water, deeper hard bottom with that transition to soft bottom are places I'm going to look. There's always going to be some muskies that are just basically roaming around in open water as well. But then if I've got a warmer, more steady day, I start my day probably in the deep water. I see no activity. I'm going to slide up. I'm going to slide up to some of the shallower stuff, because that's one, if there's a single mistake I make too often, it's sticking to the deep water only. Mm-hmm. And they will crawl right back up into 3, 4, 5 feet of water sometimes in an afternoon. So you really just gotta, you know, you gotta play the game and try different things. But generally it's gonna be a deeper pattern overall post-turnover.
Now I know your passion is muskies, and fall is your favorite time to fish muskies. But what about walleyes and bass and that type of deal? Do they react to turnover similar to a muskie?
Very similar, you know, in a lot of cases. I think that's to a certain extent why the muskies are deeper too. A lot of the forages out there, generally in most cases the walleyes are going to be a little deeper. Same thing with the smallies and that kind of thing too, and a lot of the panfish. But the wild card's always good weeds, and that all depends on the body of water, right? But if you've got a body of water with good weeds, and this is another thing we always talk about, you know, generally the clear water lakes have got deeper weeds, and the weeds stay green sometimes right through the winter.
Yeah.
And you always talk about, well, you want the good, you know, the live weeds, and you shouldn't fish dead weeds. Technically, it's, in a way you could argue that the weeds produce oxygen, and when they die, they take oxygen, but believe me, they will use dead weeds too at times. You know that.
Yeah, I know that with the walleyes too, you know, other species. But on the muskie, back on the muskie thing now, so after turnover, do you change baits to like just Suick type baits or little jerk baits or Livingston headhunters, or can you still throw bucktails and that type of stuff after turnover?
Well, surprisingly, in general, I think it's to a certain extent the species of muskie you're fishing for a little bit. It seems like to me over the years that I've found a few oddities about the spotted fish compared to the Wisconsin stream fish. And you know, even out in New York, I haven't fished out there a whole lot, but that's more of a pure stream fish. Technically, it's not Wisconsin stream, but they They tend to be more of a jerkbait, crankbait, soft plastic bite in the late fall, and generally there's no rules. I have seen Wisconsin muskies hit a bucktail with snow coming down.
Really?
But generally, topwater and bucktails are not as good, you know, in the fall post turnover. Now, Minnesota muskies, Great Lakes muskies, spotted muskies are a little bit different. They tend to go a little longer. I mean, if you've got usually a real windy cold front day is going to be lousy for bucktail and topwater. But if you get a nice steady weather day, you know, the temperature's stable and it's warming up a little bit, boy, I'll tell you what, somebody in the boat ought to be trying those two different types and see what happens.
Well, our buddy Sweet over there in Longville, Minnesota, he told me that he's used bucktails all the way into November over there for muskies on Leech Lake, you know. Yeah. So don't be afraid to try something. And I know years ago, this is a funny story, I was over in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, and there was a muskie tournament going on at that time, and it was like the 20th of October. You know what won that tournament? A surface bait. Just freak like that. So I guess try some stuff if you're fishing shallow like that, right?
Absolutely, and in all reality, especially these days, John, we talk about this quite a bit with the electronics and just the popularity of fishing in general. These fish see more lures than probably at any other time in history. That trend's probably not going to reverse itself till. So to a certain extent, you're trying to do something different. And again, if you find something working on a given day, you keep doing it. But if nothing else is working, if you're talking to some other people and everybody's having a tough day, that's the kind of things you try. Try a topwater in late fall, or a bucktail, or a spoon, or, you know, all these different things that the fish just don't see that much.
Well, over the years, you and I have had a blast fishing together with suckers. I mean, it's one of my favorite things, and I know that you love to set the hook on a sucker too. And I guess let's start with what water temperature can you start running suckers in the fall?
Well, essentially mid to low 60s, and generally on a cold front is the first time I'm going to start running suckers. But as the fall progresses, generally the colder the water gets, the better the live bait is. I always really stress, I mean, people have heard it for years, but you know, the one danger with live bait, it's 100% releasability if you set the hook right away. That's one thing that I always put out there, because some people are new to it, and you absolutely, regardless of the rig you're using, generally we use quick strike rigs, but sometimes people use just small baits with a single hook in the nose as well. Irregardless, you need to set the hook as soon as possible when that fish grabs the bait and is moving away from you. Anytime you let it, you know, hold on for even more than 10 seconds should be a rule. The longer you wait, the more things that can actually go wrong, and the biggest thing going wrong is them actually swallowing.
Well, we're looking at a quick strike rig now that you and Rob and Steve Herbeck have used. Little different ones, but they're basically the same. So when a muskie comes up and grabs the bait like that, all you want to do is get leverage and set immediately, right?
Absolutely, but you do want to make sure the fish is moving away, because that ups your odds by probably 50%. So sometimes that's the little delay. You need to put pressure. If that fish just grabbed the bait and it's sitting there, you do like to know which way it's facing. You know, filming, I don't know how many times we've done it. One real fast way that you can do that is to literally start the outboard and back up, or pull right on top of the fish and literally scare it. And the other thing is, you just put pressure on until that fish reacts to it, and they will. You just keep increasing the pressure, and soon they're going to move away, and then you just drop the rod tip and set. You know they're going down or away from you. He's going that way. Set back this way.
Get him, John!
There we go, Pete. I got him, Pete. I got him, buddy. I got him, buddy.
Good.
All right, man. Oh, whoa, got him.
John!
And I love your hook sets.
They're fun.
Do you love mine?
That's fun. You do well.
No, we have a lot of fun doing that, and the hook set is extremely important, folks. And over the years, you and I have caught a lot of muskies on television, on quick strike rigs. I don't ever remember a hook way down in the gullet. It's almost always like right in here, right?
Always. It's been, for me, it's been, I know we've never had that issue filming. When I was learning quick strike rigs, I did screw up a few times and realized that they will eat them a lot faster than was the traditional knowledge of how long it takes a muskie to eat a sucker. So, you know, I learned very quickly with that. And I've also learned that your odds are much better of actually hooking the fish as well. That's important because otherwise they're munching on it and eventually they may feel a hook point and actually hook themselves, or they're going to swim through some weeds and that's going to make them drop it. There's nothing good that could possibly happen by waiting. I really, honestly, you know, my main focus is keeping that fish alive so it doesn't swallow. That's the most important thing. But I can honestly say after all these years that you will catch more muskies if you set right away. And the other important thing we talk about all the time, and we see it more and more these days, the windows are tighter. The bursts of activity, you need to take advantage of that. And even if you miss a muskie, which can happen, sometimes they don't get the bait where they should, and they just got it by the tail, and you might miss one.
Not too far. Got him! You got him! Oh, no! Son of a gun!
Ah, that was a good one, too.
Did you get a good look at him?
No.
Oh.
Do not start thinking, oh my God, I gotta wait longer. That's not the problem. It's just the way the muskie grabbed the sucker. The important thing is you're fishing again right away and that window's still open.
Well, let's roll this scene that we shot last year with Rob. This is a great illustration of what you're talking about. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, way to go, Rob with the bad hand. Rob with the bad hand. All right,
fish.
buddy, here he is. Here he is already. Here he is.
Oh. I guess I never hooked them.
So that's the third miss that we've had today, Rob, and you said they're tail grabbing, and that's a classic example there.
You can see there's no teeth marks in the clear T-bone area, and it just had a good grip on it there, you know, all around the back end. You know, if for whatever reason why my nose clip didn't pop out, if it would have popped out, we'd have probably had a complete whiff, but that fish just had a good grip on it.
He just didn't want to let go.
Yeah, and that's, you know.
Nothing you can do about that. Whoa, got another one going there. Well, look at this, look at this, look at this. Hey, now we're talking, now we're talking. I wonder if that's the same guy. I hope it is, because that was a big fish. Give me that net, give me that net. Holy cow.
I saw the fish.
That was something else there, Robert. Okay, buddy. Okay, well, look at that. That's a big fish.
Net down.
It's down. You got to turn its head.
I know.
You got to turn its head a little bit.
I'm one-handed, man.
You're one-handed. Whoa. He's got to turn. You got it. He's hooked pretty good.
I think so.
Yeah,
I see the sucker.
Oh, that is a big fish, buddy.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
There we go. Oh, Robert.
Redemption.
Oh my gosh. Look at the size of that muskie, Rob. That is a big fish. That's 47?
Yeah, it's right up there.
Oh, and a heavy guy. Here's our all-time tummy.
Yep.
Oh, that is gorgeous, Rob.
Yep.
Just a beautiful fish, buddy. What a day of fishing, huh?
Yeah, I gotta get her back.
But I mean, that right there is a classic example. That could have been the same fish, you know, we missed the first time on the hook set, but it could have been a different fish. But your point is, windows are short. Your time frame when these fish are biting happens fast. So get back in the water as soon as you can.
Yeah, that's the greatest thing about a quick strike rig. In the way old days when we used the swallow rigs, I did go through that, and when I think about how many fish I probably lost waiting 20 minutes, or opportunities I lost waiting 20 minutes for a fish to swallow, and then you lose half of them anyway.
Yeah. And the old thing was, hey, light a cigar and smoke a cigar.
Absolutely.
And when you're done with your cigar, set the hook.
Yeah.
The muskie's already pooping out the sucker. No, I'm just kidding. But hey, and the later you get in the fall now, when you get into these real cold conditions, can trolling be an option?
Well, trolling's a real good option. You know, we always enjoy the casting and dragging the live bait better, but And here again, it all depends on how the fishery lays out. I basically tell people as simply as this: if you've got more of a bowl-shaped lakes, gradual drop-offs that aren't very erratic, and you know, but if you get the real tight breaks that have a lot of inside turns and points and stuff like that, that's where you really have an advantage. Doing the casting, vertical jigging, running that bait. Now, big bodies of water with gradual breaks, you're actually better off trolling overall, because you're just covering so much more water, and they will hit crankbaits that are trolled.
A little slower, right? You're not going 4 miles an hour.
Well, that all depends on water temperature and the water clarity. I have seen it get down to where you're only running about 2 miles an hour, and fish preference and all of those things. But generally, if you have darker water too, you want to slow down. But either way, you're still covering so much more water. And if you have more gradual breaks that are kind of straight, you can just cover it so much more efficiently.
Yeah, I remember that day. This goes back 1995, you and I trolling up in the Hayward area, and snowflakes falling. I think we had one bite the whole day, and it ended up being a 40-pounder, which was pretty exciting. But that was the only option you have sometimes in the fall when your reels are freezing up and you have those problems. You can always troll.
That's a good point too. I mean, you do once in a while get days where it literally doesn't get above freezing, and if you add wind to that, you just can't cast.
Yeah.
And that does take the fun out of it for me. I mean, I like the live baiting and setting the hook on those, but boy, I don't like it when you're only running suckers only and you can't cast. So that, if that's the case, I think you're definitely better off trolling.
And we have had some awesome years the last several years with Christian Leitner over on Lake of the Woods, and taking a look at some of those pictures of the fish that we caught, sometimes 7 in a day, sometimes 14 in 2 days. Some phenomenal fishing over there with suckers, and I just love the fall because of trips like that are so special. Going to Lake of the Woods or going up to Andy Myers on Eagle Lake and fishing for big fish in late fall. It's a blast.
Oh, it really is, yeah. There's nothing quite like it. That's why fall should last all year.
I know. But before we go, I want to talk a little bit about other fishing opportunities that are happening in the Midwest right now. And of course, if you're lucky enough to live on either side of Lake Michigan, all the salmon come in the month of October, the 4-year-old salmon, to drop their eggs in the harbors where they were planted, whether it's Kenosha, Racine, Milwaukee, Port Washington, Sturgeon Bay, any of those harbors where they planted those salmon, they come in, spawn, drop their spawn and die, and you can have a blast in there with walleye gear, going in there and catching them on spawn sacks, 20-pound fish, and it's a lot of fun. And I want to also mention, this is the time of year on Lake Winnebago where the perch bite is outstanding. That's another good option. Smallmouth fishing in Door County, you go deeper this time of year for the smallmouth. That 18 to about 25 feet, and use plastics, you're going to do it real well. What about northern Wisconsin? Is it good multi-species time too?
Oh, it really is. I've got some good buddies now they're really smallmouth heads. And that's their favorite time of year. Yeah, the fish are generally deeper. They're quite active. They'll hit the bigger baits, and they have a blast with it. And you and I a few times, that Josh Teigen up there on Schlamagen Bay. That bite is always awesome. And
that's ripping Castmasters and plastics. And you and I did that one time a couple of days before Thanksgiving. I don't think it was more than 25 degrees, but we caught beautiful fish. Yeah. So that's another great option, is that Chequamegon Bay. And can you still catch walleyes and crappies in that up in like Violet, Sawyer County areas?
Oh gosh, yeah. And in some cases there's still a weed bite, but in most cases it's basin fishing. Walleye panfish, it's to a certain extent, it kind of sucks being
Yeah, well,
stuck in muskie mode all the time, because it is a great time of the year for walleye.
well,
and
the
panfish.
more I get into my 70s, the more I'm going to ask you to walleye fish.
Yeah.
I'm just teasing you, buddy. I still love the muskie fishing. But yeah, fall is a great time. And you know, this is also, folks, a time of year when you think about putting your boat away and storing your boat and getting your snowmobiles and your ATVs out. Do you have any of that quick shot right there? This is one problem that I had last year, folks, when I didn't use my boat in the winter time, and I only had a half a tank of gas in there, and because I did not put the quick shot in, I'll tell you what, my motor ran like, well, I don't want to say it. It was horrendous. And the quick shot is something that you should put in when you store your boat, and they also recommend that you have a full gas tank, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, I use it all the time with regard to the boat. Technically, if you know you're burning the gas immediately, it's probably not as necessary, but it just keeps everything so clean, and it prevents water separation and breaks down any debris at all in the fuel. So you're not, one of the things that happens with today's modern motors, they're unbelievable, but they have sensors.
Right.
I don't even know how many, they've got 1 million sensors in them these days.
Yeah.
So if they sense any fuel restriction at all, they'll shut down on you. It might not even be much. But this absolutely prevents that. And that's why I put it in all the time. And then getting away, I guess, from the fishing topic, anytime you have gas that sits around, period, just about everybody's got what I call garage gas. You know,
Right.
I use it for my chainsaws and lawnmowers and everything else, but it sits around. I get 6 gallons of it. I don't use it all. I always mix this in right away, so I know regardless it might take 3 months, it might take 6 months even to use up that gas, and that way I know it's still going to be good all the time.
Well, just to recap there, it cost me $2,000 to get my engine repaired. And the reason being, I didn't put quick shot in. I only had a half a tank of gas, so a lot of and I store my boat outside, so a lot of moisture
Sure, yeah.
created in there, and the quick shot would have prevented that from happening. I wouldn't have had to waste 2 days to get my motor fixed, and I'd have saved $2,000.
Yeah, and you should know better.
I should know better. Yeah,
You
no,
do now.
I should know better. Hey, so next month we're going to talk a little bit about the transition from late fall to winter. We'll preview a little bit of ice fishing, and we'll talk about how you can still open water fish in November, okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, thanks for joining us today, folks. Pete and John Talk Fishing, brought to you by
Amsoil.
Amsoil.